Bob, a palindrome story. Once, many years ago, on January 1st, 1911, 1111, there was a child that was born to a couple whose names were Anna and Otto Sellis. It was a baby boy, and they named him Robert, but they decided that they would call him simply Bob. Now, Bob had an older sister. Her name was Eve. They lived on a street with a rather strange name, Yell Alley. They lived in Northern California in the town of Yreka, where Bob's parents ran the famous Yreka Bakery. Bob began to speak early on, and his first words were what you might expect: Mom, followed by Dad, and then Sis. But he did learn some other words like wow, and a toddler favorite, poop. He did expand his vocabulary, though. They learned other words like peep and did and I and deed. From the very start, Bob was kind of a picky eater. When his mom asked him what he wanted for lunch, he would express opinions. He would often say things like, "No lemon, no melon." She tried to interest him in some foreign foods, but he would usually say, "Wonton? Not now. Mom, it makes me gag." Sometimes he would tease his sister, calling her names and saying things like, "Eve is a sieve." She would respond by calling him a dud. Bob's mom said, "Bob, can't you do something a little more productive? Something different?" He said, "Like what, Mom? Dump mud? Or maybe stack cats? Or possibly spit Q-tips?" She shook her head and simply said, "No, son, no." They thought it might help if they got him a pet, and so they got him a dog, a pup. Of course, Bob named the pup Spot, but he wanted people to know that this was a very superior pet, and so he would usually refer to him as Top Spot. Bob enjoyed playing with that dog, and he could often be seen in the yard throwing sticks and balls and calling out, "Go, dog! Go, dog!" A concerned pet owner, he put a sign, a cautionary sign, on the front gate for visitors to see. "Step on no pets." When Bob went to school, he did develop some friendships, although some of his friends were a little bit odd, like Damon, a nomad, and Cain, a maniac, and one of his best friends, Neil, an alien. "So what do you want to be in life?" his parents would sometimes say, and he would usually shrug and say, "Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe a Santa at NASA?" They were afraid that he was turning into somewhat of a kook. And then the final straw was when he drew the attention of a neighborhood bully. They began to follow Bob around, calling out, "Yo, bozo boy!" Well, his parents were concerned. They sent up an SOS, and they got him admitted to a very fine private school. One fall afternoon, they drove him to the school in their family car, a Toyota. Bob's mother could be a bit of a backseat driver, and as they drove up to the school, she called out, "Toot, Otto, toot!" As they came close to the entrance, she said, "Pull up, Otto, pull up." Now, there at the school, Bob did quite well. He had some excellent teachers, including a nun. She was the remarkable Melba Kramer. And she gave Bob a lot of good advice. She would often say to him, "Live not on evil, Bob. Live not on evil." He took that to heart. At first he thought he would be interested in philosophy or even theology, asking questions like, "Do geese see God?" But after a while he realized he was more interested in science and math. He took quite an interest in radar, for example. And he discovered he really enjoyed the purely quantitative properties of numbers, often saying, "It's so simple. A six is a six is a six is a six is a six," and so on. Well, he finally graduated with a degree in engineering, and he got a job at a lab. He was pretty excited. On his first day there in the lab, he looked around in amazement and was heard to say, "Wow, so many dynamos." There were some very fine scientists that worked there, but there were a couple of mad scientists as well. There was one old codger who would go around making wild claims as to his inventions, saying things like, Madam, I made radio, so I dared. Am I mad? Am I?" Well, that was one thing, but sometimes his claims were even odder. Something like, "Mr. Owl ate my metal worm." Of course, he was completely mad, but the other scientists tried to ignore that. As for his social life, Bob had a real dislike for what he called the party trap. He did, however, meet some very nice girls, and occasionally he would bring one home to meet his parents. Amy, Ma, Amy, Ma. But one day in the park, he saw a girl that really caught his eye. He asked all of his friends about her. "Oh, who was it I saw? Oh, who?" Finally, they introduced him to her. Her name was Lil. She drove a Civic. They became quite close, and one day he presented her with her favorite flower, a mum. And he asked her to marry him. She agreed, and they were married. Bob and Lil were married at her favorite time of day, which, as perhaps you guessed, noon. It was rather warm that day, though, and Lil was heard to say, "Whew, too hot to hoot." Well, finally, Bob decided that he wanted to work with the more practical applications of science. And so he established a home security company. He named it Mr. Alarm. Of course, sometimes the equipment malfunctioned and some of his clients lost things to theft. But when they complained to him, he would always say the same thing: "Sue us." Finally, Bob was able to retire, and he and Lil spent time doing some of their favorite pastimes. They would listen to their favorite musicians, ABBA. They would eat their favorite candy, C's. And then Bob decided to buy a kayak. And then something even more daring and more expensive, he also bought a race car. Well, he enjoyed all those occupations, all those hobbies, the kayak, the race car, and he began to play percussion in a Latin band. Finally, Bob did pass away. I'm sorry to say that it wasn't from natural causes. It was a tragic accident involving TNT. Well, he'd made such an impression on people that someone wrote his biography. and they referenced some of the things he was known for. The title of Bob's biography was A Car, a Man, a Maraca. And that is the story of Bob, a palindrome story.